We are halfway through the 2024 NFL draft. It's the middle of November, and that means we are that much closer to the 2025 offseason. And Ryan and I, we are going to be starting our mock drafts for the 2025 NFL draft. This is probably one of our favorite things to do about the channel is all the kind of speculation, providing our opinions, and then also being ridiculed and made fun of by you all on the comments who know a lot more than us. And so Ryan and I, we're going to be doing 4 mock drafts as a channel during the rest of the regular season. And then come 2025, we are going to be releasing a mock draft every Monday, part of that Mock Draft Monday series as well. So today, Ryan's kicking off first here. And so before we get into that, be sure to subscribe to the Tracy Take, leave a like and a comment. Let us know who you think is going to be the first overall pick in this draft and what do you want your team to do when it's their turn to pick. And so, Ryan, I'm going to throw it over to you here if you want to pull the screen up. As I said already, this is probably like our favorite part. It's just all the offseason work and everything like that. We already love watching football, but then what we think the team should do is going to be a lot of fun. And we're started early now for one, because I guess we want to, but also to everybody that follows the Tracy Take as well. Also enjoys seeing these type of mock drafts, start to get a kind of feel of the college players, especially too now that the college football playoff rankings have come out.
Yeah,
season getting close to the postseason and college football. And have a good feel of the players, at least.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we have a pretty good feel of the players and who will be coming out. There are a couple players that I don't know if they will be coming out, and when I get to them in this draft, this mock draft, that I will kind of call them out from there. But let's just go ahead and kind of dive right in. So I am a Patriots fan. We do, unfortunately, have the number 1 overall pick here. I am not going to start out with Travis Hunter, though. I'm also not going to start out with a tackle. For me, I don't love this tackle class as much as I feel like other people do. And I also, while I really like Travis Hunter, and I think he's probably the best football player in this class, if I'm New England, I'm investing heavily on the offensive side of the ball. And I view Travis Hunter more as a corner with the ability to be in some offensive packages, not a full-time offensive player. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with my number 1 wide receiver on the board, and that's Tet McMillan. I think you look, the investment in Jalen Polk hasn't quite paid off yet. They do have some promising receivers in Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas. But when you look at it, I think those guys are definitely better as complementary pieces. Tet McMillan reminds me a little bit of Drake London. I don't mean this in a bad way because you are a Falcons fan, obviously, by your background. I think he's a much more explosive player. To me, he brings the ability to actually like beat players down the field vertically, not just with physicality, but with speed as well. And also, like, I think over the middle, he's a very good just route runner, catches in traffic well. And I think Drake London does all of those things well. I just think Tet McMillan does that to like a slightly better level as a prospect. So I think impact receiver there on day 1. Going over to Jacksonville, this one, I like. This is where I like Travis Hunter. I think they need corners. They have Brian Thomas Jr. there already. Christian Kirk is there. He did unfortunately break his collarbone this year and is missing the rest of the season. So if they want to move on from him, I think they can give Travis Hunter even more of a role on offense. But I think primarily he's going to go there to play corner and be in like those third and long offensive sets where he can go and make a play that way. But he's not going to be a full-time offensive player, and I think that's just a good fit for him there. Next up, I was originally going to go with Mason Graham here. He's my second highest graded player in this class besides Travis Hunter. But with the recent trade of Marshawn Lattimore, I'm actually going to go with Will Johnson. I think that is going to be they have a lot of corners there, but I don't think any of them are nearly as good as Will Johnson. They have invested in that defensive line with Brian Breesy as of late. And I believe, didn't they get an edge rusher in last year's class in the first round?
I'll go back and double check.
I could be wrong, but I believe they have invested in edge rusher. Cam Jordan is getting older, so I would go edge rusher there, but I have Will Johnson graded higher than any of my edge rushers. And then from there, this is where I have the Carolina Panthers on the board. This is the first quarterback. Cam Ward is coming off here. He's electric. I worry about his ability to like take what's there at times because I feel like we see those highlights in Miami where he's holding onto the ball for 6 seconds and he's running in and out of the pocket. And you can't really do that at the NFL level nearly as much. And I think Caleb Williams is learning that now. But when you just look at his ability to go make plays, I really feel like he is going to be somebody that teams are going to want to trade up for eventually in this draft as this process kind of moves along, because he has the arm talent, he has the play creation ability, he's going to have the stats to go with it, and I think he's just going to be a really tantalizing quarterback prospect. So up next,
real quick here, it was Tracy Fuaga is who the Saints drafted.
That is correct.
But to kind of to point on to that though too, like just kind of four picks in, I agree. Like the first pick, I think your Patriots are going to go receivers, and then the Jags are going to go corner here, especially too if Travis Hunter falls to them. But if not, Will Johnson, I think is a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Saints, like the Saints and Panthers, I think could go in any direction. Same thing with the Browns, and then people coming out here because even to Cam Ward as his number one, like I feel like my number one would be Shedeur Sanders, but I can see why a lot of people would want to go with Cam Ward or some of the other guys. So it's going to be fascinating to see. Already, this is totally different than last year's draft class, where we kind of figured out who the first 5, 6, 7 guys were going to be.
Yeah. And that's kind of leading up here. Mason Graham, like I said earlier, he's my second highest graded player in this class, but he is a defensive interior guy. I think you put him next to Myles Garrett, who can kind of move all around. Mason Graham is he's 320 pounds, but he can really play anywhere that has a hand in the dirt. Like he could, I don't want to say play edge in like a 4-3, but I think he is athletic enough that he could get some viable snaps out there. He doesn't want to live out there, but you could move him up and down that defensive front with Myles Garrett, and they could really pick on some matchups with him there. And so I'm going to go with him here to Cleveland. And then here in Las Vegas, this is where I have Shedeur Sanders coming off. They just have to invest a premium pick into this position, in my opinion. I think they've invested in that offensive line. They have Colt Miller at left tackle. They just did who was it? Who am I thinking? Oh, they got Brock Bowers in the first round last year. Then they have Jacoby Myers as well at the receiver spot. So like they have a pretty good offensive set. I think they just need the conductor to make everything kind of go. And I think that's Shedeur Sanders. No quarterbacks here left for New York. And in a draft scenario where I'm not doing trades, they weren't able to move up to get one. And so here, this is where I have Benjamin Morrison coming off the board here. He had a pretty good start to the season, but unfortunately went out, I believe, due to a hip injury. And so he is not playing anymore in the 2024 college season. This is a player that I would keep an eye on because he's only 20 years old. He could potentially go back to college and go back to Notre Dame and play another year there. Or he could come back, or he could come out and go in the draft. His draft stock's not, I don't know if it's going to get that much higher, but with his injuries, I think he should gauge kind of where he thinks he's going to go before he just officially makes that decision. So that is a player to keep an eye on. Up next is the Miami Dolphins. And this is where I'm going to have the first tackle coming off the board. And this is an interesting tackle class because you have Will Campbell, who is 6'6", 320. But when you watch him, I just don't know if he has the length to make it at the NFL level. There's that 33-inch cutoff that NFL tackles have to meet to be able to be successful out there. And there's also like a size requirement. While Kelvin Banks is a really good offensive lineman, he's only 6'4", 315, 320. There's a legitimate reason to be concerned just about his overall size. And I go back and watch that Georgia game, and I know he graded out okay, but I have some concerns there. With that being said, he's an absolute mauler in the run game, and I think Kelvin Banks is the one to come off the board here because this is a guy that I think can easily transition into guard if it doesn't work out at tackle. I know this is a premium pick to be spending on a guy that you have questions about at offensive tackle, but with that being said, I think he's a Pro Bowl guard, if not. And I think right now the Dolphins just need good offensive linemen. So going to go with Kelvin Banks here. Up next, Tennessee Titans. Definitely, I think they trade away DeAndre Hopkins. Calvin Ridley is there and having a good season, but Treylon Burks has largely been a bust for them. Nick Westbrook-Akina is like a good third or fourth option. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to get them a crafty playmaker, just a guy you need to get the ball in his hands, and that's Luther Burden III. Has had a little bit of an up and down 2024 season, but I think you go watch the offense from this year to last year. That offense was just so much more dynamic in 2023 for whatever reason. And he, I think, has definitely suffered because he hasn't been able to create nearly as much. He just hasn't had the opportunity to go and create plays. So Luther Burden III here with the Jets. This is going to be one I'm curious because I feel like the Jets already have a pretty good defensive interior, but a guy I really like is Kenneth Grant. He's just a really big, athletic guy that's hard to move in the middle. Sometimes I've felt that the Jets defensive front can get pushed around at times. And I think you put him next to Quinnen Williams. They both have Quinnen Williams is a great interior pass rusher. Kenneth Grant is a run stuffer first, but has really, really good pass rush upside for a guy of his size. And I think that's going to be a mismatch nightmare, especially when you look at that division. Miami likes to run the ball with Devon Achane. I know it's a little bit more speed, but Kenneth Grant is a good athlete. Patriots, they want to run the ball. They can't really do it successfully. And the Bills are a really good downhill run team. So I think beefing up in that middle area, I think is going to be very important for the Jets. And especially at this point, I'm not super high on any of the corners. There's not a ton of like receivers that I really like. And they have a good running back room already. So I don't think they're in the market for Ashton Ginty at that point. So here, speaking of Ashton Ginty, this is where I have him coming off the board. He's in that Bijan Robinson type range, just with the amount of forced missed tackles that he's created, yards after contact. Like, he's an elite runner of the football. And one of the things they haven't even really utilized in his game that much is the pass catching. And he was a really good receiver out of the backfield in 2023. Hasn't been so as much in 2024, only because of a lack of opportunity. He definitely still has that skill set. And so I think the Cowboys go and get their new bell cow running back there. This one, I didn't really know where to go with this one because I feel like the Colts have a pretty good team. They're just trying to figure out that quarterback position at the moment. Anthony Richardson has just been benched. Joe Flacco came in and had a lackluster Sunday night performance against the Minnesota Vikings. And I feel like one of the big things that this team is what missed out on last year was Brock Bowers. And I know Colson Loveland hasn't had a great season this year, but I definitely think looking at what he brings to the table, pretty similar prospect to Brock Bowers in a much less offensively talented draft class. And I think he's going to come up draft boards as this draft process goes along, simply because he had a really good 2023 in a pro style offense with an NFL caliber quarterback with JJ McCarthy, and it's totally fallen off, but so has the entire Michigan football program after 2023. So I think he's going to be a riser. I think the Colts go and get their tight end here that they missed out on in last year's draft here with Colston Loveland. The Bengals here. So I feel like they need a lot. T. Higgins is most likely moving on in free agency. I feel like this offensive line is been a bit of a mess. They've had a lot of injuries and haven't really been able to kind of make up for it. So I think they need some things on the offensive side of the ball. But again, this just isn't that talented offensive class that we saw last year. And going into that, Trey Hendrickson next year in 2025 is the last year of Trey Hendrickson's deal. They have Sam Hubbard, who's a good edge rusher, but Trey Hendrickson is also going to be, I believe, 30 or 30 and a half going into next year. So I'm going to go with my top edge rusher here, and that's going to be Nick Scorton. This dude, if you have not had the opportunity to go watch Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M, he also has a lot of Purdue tape out there as well because he was at Purdue last year. This dude is 285 pounds, 6'4", has good arm length. It has the most ridiculous spin move I've ever seen. Go watch his tape against LSU. He consistently got pressure on Will Campbell and Emory Jones Jr., the two tackles that are going to be playing on Sundays in that game. And he consistently got a lot of pressure in that game. And I love what he brings to the table. He rushes with great power. He has that great spin move. He attacks with a plan, and he can set the edge in the run game. So he's a really good edge rusher there. And I think he's going to be the future of that Cincinnati Bengals pass rush. Going on here to Seattle. This is where I have Will Campbell coming off the board. I think you look at what he brings to the table. He has really good play strength. He run blocks well. He plays with that nastiness that you want out of your offensive lineman. He would be a top 10, top 5 pick if I was much more certain about his arm length. I think he's going to come in at like 32-inch arms. And I don't see that translating to the next level. It reminds me a little bit of like Peter Skoronski in that aspect, where like he's going to fall into the double digits just because he doesn't have the arm length to stay on the outside. And I think if you look at Seattle, they need offensive linemen, and kind of the same thing as Kelvin Banks here. It's like if he doesn't work at tackle, just kick him inside, and he'll be a good guard for you. And I just think that's a good fit as well. Here at 15 with the Los Angeles Rams, again, looking at just some of their offensive players, specifically Cooper Kupp, he's going to be 32, entering the I believe the last year or two of his deal. He was involved in a lot of trade talks come this trade deadline. So I'm going to go with Isaiah Bond. I think you look at their wide receiver room, they rely a lot on like Tutu Atwell to go and stretch the field. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are good receivers, but I think Puka Nacua is more of that over the middle kind of possession style receiver. You go get an elite deep threat like Isaiah Bond, and I think that's just going to open up more windows for Puka Nacua in the future once when Cooper Kupp has moved on. So Isaiah Bond here. And then last but not least, before I take a quick break to catch my breath, Tampa Bay is on the board. And this is I don't want to say a controversial one because I really like this player, but Savon Ravel, the cornerback from East Carolina. So I believe 6'3", 190. 6'3", 193. Just a freak athlete. And I think watching him at East Carolina, he's been very good, except he tore his ACL, I think, in the third or fourth week of the season, and he hasn't been able to play since then. And it sounds like it's going to impact his draft process and his testing in a few months. And so that I think is going to hurt his draft stock, but you just go look at like his raw tools and what he brings to the table. He has the traits to be a true shutdown corner at the next level. I think you put him next to Zion McCollum, and that Tampa Bay defense gets a lot better. So Savon Ravel there with the 16th pick. I'm going to take a quick break, let you talk a little bit, and get your thoughts on kind of what I've done so far.
No, it's I think it's been solid so far. The kind of some of the ones that stuck out to me, I would say the Colston Loveland pick, even actually at the New York Jets, I was thinking like maybe they go tight end there to help out with some of the offensive line guys as well. And then you get a much better tight end option, more consistent option for Aaron Rodgers in kind of a win now mode.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to do that. And so I think the quarterbacks are going to be interesting. I talked about that earlier with Cam Ward, and then you follow up with Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur Sanders really wants to go to Las Vegas, so I think he keeps hoping that that they keep on losing here. I think one other area that the Colts, I think, could have gone, and it's one of the things, too, you mentioned that the Colts were a good team, and I'm not saying they're not, but that defense is one of the worst defenses in the league currently, and Malachi Starks is still on the board there, so getting a safety for that team, or if anything on the secondary, maybe even anything on the defensive side of the ball, I think might be more of a route that they go. Because to your point, offensively, I mean, if that offensive line stays healthy, they're going to have Jonathan Taylor. If AR-15 keeps progressing, and if that's the quarterback that they still go with, or if Joe Flacco's still there, whatever is happening, he's going to come into a good situation with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce has been developing well, at least this year. And so that's what's going to be interesting. But in all these, in a lot of these other picks, I feel like they could go in so many different directions. I know, like Ashton Genty is a big name. Where is he going to fall? And the Cowboys is one of those teams. They can probably pick any position, maybe outside of quarterback, just because of the contract that they have with Dak Prescott. And so last year's draft, it was blue chip after blue chip after blue chip, and they just kind of like best player available. This one, though, it's going to be kind of fascinating to see our development from this mock draft and then our final mock draft and how guys rise and fall. Even to you mentioned a guy like Savon Ravel, who, and I'm blanking on the name, who's the guy that the Eagles drafted out of Toledo last year.
Quinyon Mitchell.
Quinyon Mitchell, that group of five cornerback that has a physical traits and is a stud. It sucks that he has an ACL injury, but luckily, hopefully it was early enough and he can kind of get into the combine and training process that he's like, hey, maybe it can be okay and guys can take a flyer on him. Because I think this draft class, it's going to be a lot of guys that you maybe take flyers on just because there's not that blue chip talent prospect that's going to be as available. So a guy like Colston Loveland could rise up. Ashton Genty could rise up because athletically there's one of the best players. And maybe a guy like Savon Ravel, like, hey, if we like what we see on film, but we're concerned about the injury, but what else are we going to do at this position? Like, let's go ahead and take a flyer on this guy. We'll kind of have to wait and see how things keep shaping up.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an interesting one. I do want to touch on Malachi Starks. I don't want to ruin like the rest of the draft. I just am not super high on him. He's a very versatile safety. I think he does a lot of things well, but positional value, I just don't have him as high as some of the other guys. And so maybe that
Yeah.
is an area I think where I missed, but he's not going to be making an appearance in this mock draft. So let's get back into it here. Starting off with San Francisco. I am really high on this tackle, specifically Ariante Ursary. I just think you look 6'6", 325. He has arm length for days, smaller in the run game, needs a little bit of work in his kick slide and his pass rush sets, but I think he's going to go there. He's probably going to sit for a year behind Trent Williams while Trent Williams finishes out his career. And then I think he should be primed to come in and be that Trent Williams replacement because he has the ceiling and the tools to be one of, if not the best tackle in the league. He's just not quite polished enough yet. He's just very toolsy. And so I think Ariante Ursary comes off the board here. Chicago Bears up next at 18, kind of starting a run on tackles here. So very different guy than Ariante Ursary. Wyatt Milam, he has the tools. I think he has the arm length. He has the size and weight, but he's just not quite the athlete that Ariante Ursary is. However, he's a more polished product coming out of West Virginia. He's had almost 200 pass blocking snaps. He hasn't allowed a single pressure throughout this year, and they've had a decently tough schedule at West Virginia. He played a whole half against Abdul Carter before he got injured in the Penn State game and didn't allow a pressure against Abdul Carter. And so I really like him as a player. He is one of my guys in this class that I think is going to be a pretty heavy riser, I think, as we get into that process, because he's just a do-good offensive lineman, and I feel like you can never have enough of those on your team.
Mm-hmm.
So put him there with Chicago. Speaking of Abdul Carter, I'm going to have him come off the board here. It's not necessarily a need, but this is a guy that is in that edge one conversation, and I really think you look at like what Denver has. I think he could be that outside linebacker that could really create pressure, especially on third downs. He's also versatile enough. He could play middle linebacker for them. He can move all over. And I think that would be really good for that defense that is already more successful than people thought in 2024 to just go ahead and add a great defender here in Abdul Carter. So next up, Arizona. Kind of seeing a trend here of run on tackles, run on edge rushers. Going to stick with edge rushers here. I'm going to have Michael Williams come off the board. To me, this is like the Ariante Ursary prospect of the edge rushers. Great length, great physical traits, really great athlete. Doesn't quite have the production that you would want, but I think go look at that Texas game. Texas has two potential first-round tackles in this class. Kelvin Banks will be a first-round pick. Cameron Williams is TBD. But Michael Williams just dominated those matchups. And it was really all with his physical traits and just his ability to be a 6'5", 265-pound, super bendy edge rusher with arms that can touch each sideline. But I think you go add him into this Jonathan Gannon defense. I think that's going to give them a really good edge pressure that they need in that division. So I like Michael Williams there. Chargers here up at pick 21. And think of all the freaks that we've had come out of Michigan on that defensive side of the ball. And just imagine what John Harbaugh, is it John or Jim? I get that mixed up. Jim Harbaugh. Yeah. Imagine what Jim Harbaugh could do with a guy like Deion Walker and his physical traits. Dude is 6'6", 360, 6'6", 345. He's taking snaps at like a wide 9. Like that's what Will McDonald does for the Jets as a 245-pound edge rusher. It's just absolutely insane. Freak athlete here. Again, very raw, but you see the developmental traits there. And I think getting Deion Walker there, that's going to solve a lot of the run defense problems that they've been having over the last 3 or 4 years that are already improving. But you go put a big, meaty defensive tackle that can really move in the middle, and I think that's a really good combination there as well. So next up, your Atlanta Falcons. I'm curious on your thoughts on this one. So you guys go trade for Matthew Judon. Don't extend him. But you do invest in some other outside linebacker types, like I believe Braylon Trice kind of fits that mold at the weight that he came into the NFL at after he dropped like 30 pounds from Washington. So I'm going to go with a guy, LT Overton. And if you can't sense a trend here, LT Overton was a guy that nobody really was talking about coming into this draft, but you go watch him at Alabama, and just kind of a freak athletically, 6'5", 285, can play with a hand in the dirt, athletic enough to be standing as well. Reminds me a little bit of Keon White, but from the Patriots, but more explosive and just more violent. Like he just creates violence in that interior. And so they list him as an edge, but he's really kind of a very versatile piece you can move around that defense. And I think he could be a really big key in solving some of the pass rush issues that the Falcons have been having. Next up, Green Bay Packers. Again, kind of the same feel here, but Cameron Williams is another guy that I feel like could go back to Texas. But if he does come out, I think he's going to be a first-round pick just on tools alone. You don't see 20-year-olds that are 6'5", 330 that are like 15% body fat that often. Like he's just an absolute massive tackle. You cannot coach that size. And so I think going in the Packers getting a young developmental tackle here, especially for a team that really has a lot of pieces already, I think is going to be a very good move for them going forward. Baltimore next up at pick 24. This is an interesting one, and I'm curious on Baltimore fans' thoughts on this. So Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia, I think is a really interesting piece because he could play edge rusher. He could play middle linebacker. It's kind of all over the place. But I think you look with Justin Matabuke, I think he can be on the outside of him. And I know everybody is going to scout the uniform of Abdul Carter and kind of make that comparison to Micah Parsons because they both from Penn State. They both were number 11. Well, Jalen Walker wears number 11 too. And to me, what he brings to the table is Micah Parsons-esque with his ability to move around the formation, his ability to impact games from wherever. So I like Jalen Walker a lot. I think he's a really good player, and that pains me to say as a Georgia Tech fan. So moving on from there, pick 25 here with the Houston Texans. They have an interesting dilemma. I don't say dilemma because they have a lot of good skill position players. Stephon Diggs is leaving. One guy that I think is having a good season this year, but I think will be harder to replicate is going to be Joe Mixon. And one of the guys that I really, really liked last year, being a Patriots fan, watched a lot of North Carolina. Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, is a fantastic football player. Dude is explosive. He can make guys miss in space. He can break tackles. He, to me, is like, okay, Ashton Jeanty is a great running back, and I think he's probably going to go around the top 10. I like the guys like Omarion Hampton that you can get at the top of the second round into the first round are like the reasons why the Ashton Jeantys don't come around that often. Because this is just to me great value. He's a great football player, and he can do anything and everything you want from a running back. So Omarion Hampton here to the Houston Texans. Philadelphia, this is another one of my guys in this class, but Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher from Boston College. I typically don't like edge rushers that are below 250 pounds, especially guys that are, I believe he's 6'2". Yeah, 6'2", 247. But one thing about him is like it doesn't seem to matter because the big problem with guys that are that size is they get pushed around a lot in the run game just because they don't have enough weight to really set the edge. But he has ridiculously long arms, and it really allows him to keep tackles off of him and set the edge in the run game. And I think if you go look at his past few grades, like from PFF for the last few years, he actually graded out a lot better against the run in his first 2 years as a player for Boston College. And then this year in 2024, in the end of 2023, is really when he started to turn up the pass rush because he's just developed his pass rush moves a little late. And so I think he's a really good edge rusher. He's going to be put in a situation where he's going to have two amazing defensive tackles in Jalen Carter. I almost said Jalen Walker. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis in the middle. And so I think I really like that fit there for him. And he has a lot of speed. It plays really, really fast. So I like that fit as well there. Coming up for Pittsburgh, they need some wide receivers. And I think you look, Emeka Egbuka is a fantastic possession wide receiver. I saw a stat, and I'm not sure if it's like the numbers exactly, but it was like Emeka Egbuka had like 48 catches in 2024 through like the first 8 or 9 weeks of college football. Like 37 of them were for a first down. Like that is just ridiculous. Like 75% of his catches are for first downs. So that is going to make him a lot of money at the next level. I think he's going to get drafted here by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think you have George Pickens on the outside. You get Emeka Egbuka going over the middle. Calvin Austin is kind of your gadget guy. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren in the backfield. And that's a really complete skill position player room. Not to forget Pat Freiermuth in that conversation there as well. So Washington here. I went back and forth on this one because I do think that James Pierce Jr. is a first round.
Oh, do you mean Minnesota?
Or yeah, Minnesota. Yeah. I went back and forth on this one because I do feel that James Pierce Jr. is a first round pick, and I do think that he belongs in the first round. But there's a guy that I really like that I think needs to be talked about more, and that is Alabama guard Tyler Booker. Tyler Booker is just a solid guard. He's a plug-and-play guy, and I think you look at that Minnesota offensive line, that interior could definitely be improved. Christian Darrisaw, unfortunately, tore his ACL, so they traded for Cam Robinson, who's going to be a free agent. But if they can re-sign him, Christian Darrisaw can come back. I think you have two really solid tackles. Going and getting a guard, I think, is going to do a tremendous amount for that run game. And then, you keep Aaron Jones, you have that run game. You still have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, and TJ Hawkinson should be coming back from injury, I believe, soon. That's a really good group. I think he is? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if because he just came back recently because he missed the good first bit of the season.
He got his first catch on Sunday Night Football against the Colts.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. And so go get Tyler Booker. I think that helps solidify this offensive line with your young tackle. I think that's a really good pick there. And then also, this is where James Pierce Jr. is coming off the board. He's too explosive. My big thing is he can get pushed around too much in the run game. And that's why I have Ezeraku over him. It's because Ezeraku just does a better job of keeping guys off of him. But James Pierce Jr., his explosiveness and his ability to get after the passer, especially on third downs, is going to be very much coveted at the NFL level. And so I think that is a good fit there with Dan Quinn. He's not going to be Micah Parsons for Dan Quinn like Micah Parsons was in Dallas. But I think you look at the explosiveness off the edge, that's definitely the kind of chaos and just one more thing I think that Dan Quinn wants offenses to have to think about. So coming up next is the Buffalo Bills. This is where I have Jahad Campbell coming off the board. They have some pretty good linebackers right now, I think led by Terrell Bernard, but that linebacker room definitely took a hit when Tremaine Edmonds left in free agency a couple off seasons ago. Jahad Campbell is a fantastic linebacker. It's, I think, 6'5", 245, just a great linebacker. He moves sideline to sideline super well. I think that's a really good fit there. He can definitely shoot the gaps, and I think allow Sean McDermott to have that defense in like 2021, 2022 form when they were really a top flight defense in the NFL. So lastly, kind of getting into the final two picks here, the Detroit Lions, I have going with Jack Sawyer. I think that's just a really good fit. They have Aiden Hutchinson. I know they also just traded for Zadarius Smith, but when Aiden Hutchinson comes back, I think you want him to have that Batman and Robin kind of vibe. And I think Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, there are probably more explosive edge rushers on the board. I think JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer's teammate, is a maybe more intriguing pass rushing prospect. But when you look at what Dan Campbell and that defense want to do, they want to have 4 down linemen. They want to be able to stop the run. And I think that Jack Sawyer translates to that better. And so with that last pick here, an interesting one all in all, but right now I am going to go with, I got to go to the next page. And I'm really curious on Chiefs fans' thoughts on this, because I think Travis Kelce, you can kind of see, I think he's starting to really slow up this year. I think he's 34, 35. And I think life after football is kind of already starting with him, with his podcast with his brother. And I think the miles are starting to add up. I'm going to go with Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Dude is just a monster. I mean, get the ball in his hands. His big problem in 2023 was that he just had too many drops. And I think right now he only has like 1 or 2 drops on the whole season, and he's making these great contested catches. He's really all Penn State has on offense at the moment. And I'm a Drew Aller fan. I just think outside of Tyler Warren, skill position wise, they're just not that good. And Tyler Warren is making up for all of it. And so I think that getting him in there, Travis Kelce might still be around for another season or two, but this is your tight end of the future there in Kansas City. And so that is my first mock draft. And Tyler, what do you think?
I'm glad we're doing this, man. It's that's what I'm thinking right now because it's just going to be so fascinating to see. As I said already, this mock draft now versus then like what our final mock draft is and versus what happens in April come when the first round is done, because all these guys like, and you and I, we've been studying for like the season now and even kind of coming into the season, some of the names. James Pierce Jr. is a guy we were talking about. This is probably a potential first overall pick, and now he's barely getting into the first round. And that's why I think it's going to be fascinating. And then I think, especially too, a lot of teams, especially early on, have a lot of needs. So that combined then with there's not too many top prospects overall is what's going to make this very fascinating on what the puzzle pieces are going to be. A lot of opinions are going to be out there. I thought you did a good job explaining yourself, especially to like even for example like with the run on edge rushers right there, starting with Abdul Carter for the Denver Broncos, Miko Williams, and Deion Walker. You could see all those situations going there. And I was actually hoping that Miko Williams and actually LT Overton as well, so the four in a row. I was honestly hoping that like Miko Williams fell to the Falcons a little bit, but I can absolutely see that happening, especially too with those guys, with all those teams right there. Cardinals need help on defense. Chargers, Joey Bosa is getting old and he's a little more injury prone. I'm pretty sure he's coming into he's in a contract year right now. The Falcons, obviously, everybody knows how bad our defensive line is, and we're injury riddled. You mentioned Braylon Trice. Now, it would have been fun to see him play this year, but he tore his ACL in preseason. Rook, defensive tackle, he's on IR right now. We haven't even seen Brandon Dorless play. And then Grady Jarrett is resting right now for an Achilles strain. So it's like our defensive line, we threw so many pieces at it, and still we just can't, and traded for Matt Judon, and still just cannot get a good pass rush. So what are the Falcons going to do there? I think it's going to be really interesting also where the teams fall. As right now, there's going to be a lot of adjustments from just in the positioning as well, and how that's going to affect certain players. Like, is there going to be a quarterback taken first? Is there going to be more quarterbacks taken in the first round? Like some teams maybe want to take a late round flyer for a development guy. If a team like, let's say, a team like Pittsburgh maybe goes kind of far, or no, I would say that I'd say actually all the teams that are currently in the playoffs right now are good on quarterbacks. And so like monitoring the quarterback situation, because that was a big point of contention last year. So I thought you did a good job. I think the name, I was thinking about this earlier, and this will be my last point. I'm curious where Emeka Egbuka does fall, because he's been the second fiddle kind of guy like during his career there. No fault to his own. I mean, when you're going with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then now even into this with Jeremiah Smith as well. He's been a good support role player. And I think actually him going to the Steelers there would be interesting, because that would be kind of his role compared to George Pickens, who's your big explosive guy. So our team's going to value that, or since maybe he's not the top best of prospect, they can go get an Emeka Egbuka in the second or third round, or maybe he'll fall a little bit to the second or third round. And so that's what's going to be very interesting on what teams value, and monitoring kind of what some teams have addressed in the past, what are their weaknesses, and kind of that might help us gauge what direction we think they might go.
Yeah. I mean, Emeka Egbuka, so like I've done mock drafts where I have all the receivers go in the top 20. I've also had mock drafts where really only Ted McMillan goes in the top 15, and then all those guys are even later. I do feel like, especially in this draft, we saw this a little bit in, I believe it was 2021, 2022. Teams started to just favor guys that played on the interior over questionable skill position prospects. Yeah. And I am curious to see kind of what ends up happening there, because I could see I believe I had 4 wide receivers go with Ted McMillan, Isaiah Bond, Luther Burden, and then Emeka Egbuka. I could see one of those guys potentially falling into the second round and going from there. So
exactly, yeah.
A lot of edge rushers. a good bit of tackles. I'm not super high on this tackle class. The two tackles that I actually like are the toolsy guys in the later round, and Cameron Williams and Ariante Ursery, because I feel like they're true tackles. Whereas I feel like you might be trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with the guys that are graded higher. And so that to me, I think, is a really interesting dynamic there of just how do these tackles grade out and what does this draft process look like? Because I think these measurements are going to be really important for Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell. So I don't know. It's interesting. I also only had two quarterbacks go. I just Jalen Milroe was up there in that conversation for me as a first round quarterback, but just with his play lately and the kind of the fall off of Alabama, I know he has actually still played okay, but that to me, is more concerning after that Georgia game. Some of the tape there isn't as good as I had thought. He's also still very much a work in progress. I correlate him more to like a Jalen Hurts type prospect, and I know that is like Jalen Hurts. You're like, oh, he's a $250 million quarterback, and like yes. However, he was a second round pick. Like he just got developed in the NFL. So that's kind of how I feel there with Jalen Milroe.
Well, and especially to the quarterback position as well, because like last year, obviously you had Bo Nix go 12, and the next guy was Spencer Rattler 155. And it's going to be very interesting how these teams value their quarterbacks, because there are going to be guys like Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, as you mentioned. Garrett Nussmeier is a guy that I think could be interesting if he goes to the draft.
I want him to go back to school.
Moss. We've talked about that, and I could absolutely see that and have him keep developing, because he's a guy. I think he's got the tools, and the way he can sling it and his anticipation is very interesting on what a team I think could work with him on. But at the same time, though, too, all those four names I just mentioned there, I don't see going to day 3. I think all those guys are going to be somewhere in that 40 to maybe 75 range that teams maybe take a flyer on to go and develop,
I could see Carson Beck making it to day 3 with how he's been playing.
And that's okay. That's a fair point too. Yeah. So it's because he hasn't really played. I think I saw that they're scoring more points when he throws interceptions versus than when he doesn't throw an interception in a game, which I thought was funny. But so it's going to be fascinating to watch the quarterback class. I can agree with you, though, where I think skill position player-wise, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys drop, and then some of the interior guys, front seven on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe we see a couple more linebackers, like a couple guys that weren't in there were Danny Stutzman, Harold Perkins Jr., who I know has an injury right now.
That's another guy I want to go back to school. He's only 20, I believe. He has a few more years of eligibility, come back. I think he'd be a top 15 pick if he can play. Like if he comes back next year and plays a full season, he has the ability to be a top 15 pick. And then like some of the safeties, like I didn't include Malachi Starks. One of the things too, like the NFL has shown over the past few years that like linebackers and safeties specifically, they just don't value those positions as much. So I struggle to put those guys in a mock draft, especially when like, to me, Danny Stutzman is very scheme specific. Danny Stutzman, while he's serviceable in coverage, he's much better coming downhill and playing the run. So he does need to go to a team actually probably similar to like a Jihad Campbell, although Jihad Campbell is better than Danny Stutzman in my eyes. He needs to go to a team like Jihad Campbell went to the Bills, where he's going to be that true middle linebacker, and he's going to be able to come down and shoot that A and B gap and fill those gaps to help stop the run. So that to me, I think is going to be important. Scheme is going to be very much important in this draft, just because the total lack of blue chip talent.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's go ahead and wrap up this mock draft here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It is the best way to help out the channel. And other than that, we will see you guys next time.